Welcome to GMF Talk. I'm Sertan Sanderson, and I'm truly excited to welcome one of the best-selling authors of our time with me today. Elif Shafak has written 11 novels and several non-fiction titles in English alone. And over the past 20 years, she has also established herself as a forward thinker, fighting for minority rights while trying to inspire the people around the world to think outside the box. Welcome to the show, Global Media Forum'a hoş geldiniz.
Hoş bulduk. Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you, and for those of you who don't happen to speak Turkish, that was Turkish. Now, before we dive into the nitty-gritty of your work, your activism, and your passion, there's something more generic I'd like to know first, if I may. So, I guess it's fair to say that we live in extremely precarious times in which reality seems to be as strange as fiction at times. And as a best-selling global author, what are your views on this current age we're living in? Is fact really stranger than fiction today?
What a great question, and I fully agree with you. I mean, there are so many moments when people feel like the life we're living is almost surreal, isn't it? It's full of uncertainties. Of course, with the pandemic, that feeling has aggravated in a way. We're living in the age of anxiety. I think it's like an existential angst. We're living in the age of anger, fear, frustration, but also we're living in the age of change, and we know that change is possible. So it's a very interesting moment, like in-betweenness, I call it. The old world is no more, but the new world is not born yet, and we are in the middle. And that is a difficult place to be in because it's full of uncertainty. And I think at a moment like this, we need global solidarity, we need global sisterhood, but we especially need books, words, stories, empathy, connections. We should not be drawn into artificial tribes of nationalism or any other fundamentalism. We need to connect across borders.
Fantastic. And you did mention some political themes there. So I'd just like to know, how do social and political events in your life and in your home country, Turkey, influence your writing? In what ways do you use literature as a way to deal with the ever-changing uncertainty of our times, especially when it comes to Turkey?
Yes, literature is where my heart beats, you know. It's how I breathe. It's how I connect with the world. It's how I perceive everything around me. So for me, it's at the heart of everything. Stories. And I describe myself as a storyteller. But that said, my storytelling is a curious storytelling in the sense that I am a curious person. And I think we all are, aren't we? So I learn from different disciplines. So I learned from life. But basically, I think as a writer coming from a wounded democracy or a wobbly democracy, countries like Turkey or Pakistan or Venezuela or Brazil, but nowadays also Hungary, nowadays also Poland, the list is so long, and that list is getting longer, unfortunately. So if you happen to be a writer from wounded democracies, you do not have the luxury of saying, you know what, I'm not going to talk about what's happening outside the window. You don't have the luxury of saying, I only want to talk about fiction and nothing else. Because we writers are not disconnected from the societies where we come from. But also, I am a feminist. And I've learned many, many things from feminist movements of past generations. And one of the most fundamental things we have learned from early feminists was that politics is not only about political parties, it's not only about parliaments or politicians, what politicians do. Politics is broader than that. Wherever there's power, there is politics, which means you might be writing about sexuality, you might be writing about gender discrimination, you might be writing about women's issues, and you might still be doing political work. So if you describe politics in such a broad way, again, you cannot be apolitical or non-political. But that said, for me, there's a very important nuance. I'm interested in asking questions. As a writer, I don't try to give any answers. I don't know the answers myself. We're learning, all of us, together. But I think a writer's job is to create an open space where we can talk about difficult issues, including taboos, and try to give more voice to the voiceless and try to give more power to the disempowered. So for me, rather than looking at the center, I'd rather look at the periphery and try to see who are the ones who are forgotten, silenced, and forsaken today.
Those are very inspiring words. And you mentioned it yourself. You mentioned wobbly democracies. In many countries, we are observing a backward trend when it comes to human rights, including especially freedom of speech. You yourself have faced attempts to put a gag order on your self-expression. For example, when you wrote about the Armenian genocide, which the Turkish government to this day denies was a planned massacre. Now, in your own words as a writer, as an intellectual, and as an outspoken activist, what does freedom of speech mean to you personally? And how can we communicate to people around the world how crucially important it truly is, not only for our democracies, but also to the human condition itself?
Yes, I fully agree. And you put it so beautifully, because without freedom of speech, we can't have any chance for imagination, for literature, thinking and advance, progress. It's impossible if there is no freedom of speech. That's the oxygen we need in order to exist. So I wholeheartedly believe that democracies do not only survive with a ballot box. Democracies do not only survive with elections. Turkey has elections, relatively speaking, regular elections. It's not a democracy. Russia has elections, but it's not a democracy. So clearly, I respect the ballot box enormously, but all I'm saying is, in addition to the ballot box, we need other things in order to make that system a proper democracy. What do we need? We need rule of law. So important. Separation of powers. No human being, no political party in this world should be too powerful. It is not good. We need, as human beings, we need to correct each other. So separation of powers is very important. But we need a free media, diverse media. We need women's rights, minority rights, LGBT plus rights, and we need freedom of speech. Together with all these components and the ballot box, a democracy can survive. If the components are broken, that system cannot be a democracy. It can only be majoritarianism. And from majoritarianism into authoritarianism, it's a very quick fall.
We've come to the end of part 1 of our interview with Elif Shafak, best-selling author, and I'm looking forward to welcoming everyone back to part 2 of our interview with Elif Shafak next week. Thank you very much.